Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 14th Planning Commission meeting and ask you if you have cell phones or pagers, if you would either turn those off or silence them now for us. If you are not the applicant and you are here to talk to us about a case, there are sheets like this on the table outside. You can complete one for the case you're interested in and give it to our secretary. We would be very happy to hear from you. If there are several of you here to talk about an individual case, we would ask that you keep your comments brief and to the point, and also not repeat something that someone else has already said. And with that, we'll go to approval of minutes. Move approval. Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Cast your votes. The minutes are approved.
Continuance requests, we have 7 uncontested requests for continuance. Items 25 through 29 continued through to July the 12th. Item 30 and 31 are continued until August the 9th.
Is there anyone today who came to talk to us about any of the cases on the agenda, items 25 through 31? Okay.
We have 3 new requests.
We need a motion on that first. Sorry.
Move the uncontested continuance.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the uncontested request. Cast your votes. And they are continued.
We have 3 new requests for continuance. Item 20, which is SPUD 667. Item 21, SPUD 670. Both requests to continue until July the 12th. Then item 22, SPUD 623, continue indefinitely.
And is there anyone here to address us on items 20, 21, or 22? If you give us your name.
Ross Dubry, 2220 Shadow Lake Drive, Oklahoma City. A hearing on item number 20, SPUD 667. On behalf of at least one of the homeowners, no objection to the continuance. Now that is to the 12th?
Yes, July 12th.
No objection on their behalf.
Thank you. Anyone else? Take a motion on the 3 items, 20 through 22.
Move the new requests.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the additional request. Cast your votes. That's approved. Are there any continuance requests from the public today? Hearing none.
We are on the consent docket. There are 3 items on the consent docket today. Item 1 is C-6355. It's the final plat of Santa Fe Crossings, Section 2. Item 2 is C-6357, the final plat of Metro Industrial. Item 3, SN-076, which is a name change from Wedgewood Drive to Wedgewood Creek Drive.
Same question. Anyone who wants to talk to us about items 1, 2, or 3 on the agenda?
Move the consent.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent cases. Cast your votes. And they're approved.
On items requiring separate vote, the first item is item 4, DA 23539, application by L&H Real Estate, LLC, to obtain a lot split deed on property at 12350 and 12360 North MacArthur Boulevard.
Good afternoon. Tim Johnson with Johnson Associates representing the applicant. Anybody who's familiar with this area recognizes that this has been a kind of a piecemeal piece of property over the last 20 years. The particular piece of property we're trying to split into 2 pieces already has existing 2 buildings on it. It has a private drive access serving it. And overall, this portion of the property had been subdivided many times through lot split. So we are here today to request by the Planning Commission a lot split deed approval that allows us to create 2 separate tracts of land for the marketing of these 2 independent buildings. We have agreed with the city staff on all the requirements. We are including a strip of land to allow us to access to a public sewer. Currently it's on the sewer, but it doesn't have public access, so we're going to allow that to occur so that that can be brought up to code. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, no one has signed up. We have a variance to T, number 1.
Motion to approve. We've got a
variance T, number 1.
I'll move the variance.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the variance. Cast your votes. The variance is approved.
Move the application.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 4. Cast your votes,
Thank you.
and you're approved.
Item 5 is PUD SP 1447. This is a specific plan for TGIF storage pursuant to approval of PUD 1447 at 11,800 North I-35 Service Road in Ward 7.
My name is Charles Allen, Allen Engineering, the applicant. We've submitted a specific site plan in accordance with the PUD. I think we've been pretty well in accordance with that. A couple little items to note on there. Under the A facade, the color, the walls would be light stone with blue trim. I think on the elevations we're showing a blue roof. It's actually going to be a polar or white roof instead of the actual blue. The other item, having the buildings on the property line for screening, kind of defeats the purpose of having a landscape buffer. So we'd like a, I guess, variance on having the buildings actually on the property line. There's also quite a bit of relief if you're looking at the grading plan along the south property line.
Well, I think the option is just one or the other.
Okay.
I mean, so if you wanted to use the buildings as your site screening, they'd want those right on the property line, but if you want to do landscaping, that's great.
Okay. We're not proposing a dumpster for this site. The site's unmanned, no bathrooms, no office. It's rented by appointment only. You show up, enter in your code. Code gets you access to your unit. You can only open up your unit, then you leave. And with that, we're not showing any parking on the plan. So I guess we're looking for a variance on that. Other than that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
If there ever was to be a dumpster, you'd agree to screen it, even though you're not planning for it?
Yes.
I'd like to make that a T, even, it's just not going to happen probably,
Yeah.
but
I mean,
if
that's
you
fine.
did, you'd screen it. Commissioners, no one signed
About
up.
the dumpsters.
Pardon?
I have a question about the dumpsters. So,
He's not going to use them.
but if he does, they'll be screened or whatever?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, never mind.
I'm a little unclear about the parking. I mean, it's a very specific use and plan, but, I mean, if it should cease to be that use, is it prudent to permit there to be no parking on the side, or?
Well, I think if we changed the use and, for example, had an office or something, we'd have to come in for another permit.
Yeah.
Permit the office. The office is going to require parking at that
Okay.
point.
JJ?
There'll be required parking to meet code for the mini storage,
Yeah.
regardless. So
I guess we're going to...
there's a parking requirement for mini storage.
Right.
That you'll have to, it's not much.
We're not proposing any parking at this time.
You will. I mean, you'll have to. There's a parking requirement you'll have to meet when you get your building permit. I think it's one space for every 5,000 square feet of building.
I guess, do we need to request a variance then, or can we not do that at this point?
It would, you'd have to come either to the Board of Adjustment or back here
Okay.
for a parking variance.
Okay. I thought that was part of the specific site plan.
Okay, no one has signed up, Commissioners.
What are we doing with the parking now? Is he going to provide parking or not?
Well, there's, as JJ just said, there's a parking requirement in the code, so either complies with that or comes back to us or goes to the Board of Adjustment for a variance to that requirement.
Okay.
So today, it's not our issue.
Okay, because on the site-specific plan, it should show all the elements, though.
Right.
So are you okay with where you are, or do you need to continuance to sort this out?
No, we have some space there that we're showing for parking, but it was for RV parking. We'll designate that as parking.
Okay.
The owner's here, Michael Anderson, the owner of TGIF, is here this afternoon. Doesn't plan to have outdoor parking on this unit. We just showed it there in case it were sold and the future owner wanted to have outdoor parking, which is allowed in the PUD.
Motion?
I'll move approval.
Second, with one clarification, the two TEs, Charles,
you're in agreement with. The one was dumpsters will be screened if you have them. Well, you said you're not going to have them, so I'm assuming you're still in agreement with that.
Correct.
And then the first one was you'll have screening of some type. You'll either screen it with a building or landscaping.
Landscaping. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 5. Cast your votes. And it's approved. Thank you.
Item 6 is PC 10308, application by James L. Stewart, SWTP LLC, to rezone 124 Southeast 43rd Street from R2 medium-low density residential to C1 neighborhood commercial in Ward 4.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Our application today is to rezone 124 Southeast 43rd from R2 to C1 neighborhood commercial. This is an application where we have a site that sits north of C3, west of C3, and south of C3. So it's surrounded by commercial uses. There's some I-2 in there as well. So what we've come in with is C1, which is neighborhood commercial, which is an appropriate buffer between a C3 and the neighborhood that's in close proximity. Staff has recommended approval, and it's in conformance with the plan. I'm here to answer any questions if you have them.
No one signed up, Commissioners.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
So a motion and a second to approve item 6. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Thank you.
David, I'm going to give you one more, and then I'm going to take it an item out of order.
Oh, okay.
If I may.
7 and 8. You want me to do 7?
Do 7, and then we'll...
7 and 8 are companions.
Oh, okay. Well, let's table them both for just a minute then, if you don't mind. We've got an applicant who has to be out of town at a certain time. I'm going to take item 19 out of order, if it's agreeable with Commissioners. We've got an applicant who needs to be in Dallas by 6 p.m. I think 19.
This is SPUD 673, an application by Maximum Mint to rezone 5505 Brookline Avenue from PUD 566 to SPUD 673 in Ward 2.
Okay. Applicant, give us your name and address for the record and tell us about your application, please.
Jay Matheson, 600 East John Carpenter Freeway, Irving, Texas. My name is, no, I told you that.
And tell us what your proposal is, please.
Our proposal is to, we are acquiring some additional land to the south of, get my bearings right, I believe it's to the south of us, and in doing so we need to amend the PD to include those additional parcels and also increase the density of the property so that we can proceed with the development.
Now, for clarification, it's my understanding that you've agreed to submit a specific plan when you're ready to proceed?
Absolutely. We would certainly entertain doing that.
Well, that will become a TE and then a requirement.
That's fine.
Okay.
We'd be glad to do that.
Good. Commissioners, comments or discussion? I think it's a pretty interesting proposal, frankly.
It is.
Glad to see it.
It is an interesting proposal. I have a few questions, Sal. In your list of items that you are limiting to no more than 15% of your floor area, you included some things that don't quite make sense to me. The first one being horticulture. Having a little hard time seeing how that factors into your plan.
Yes. No, that was boilerplate language that came from city staff, and we just didn't edit it.
Okay, well, we're going to edit it now.
The only things we would want, the only things we really would entertain in the base of the building would be a retailer, a dry cleaner, maybe some kind of light restaurant use, not a set-down, full-service restaurant type use whatsoever.
You thinking of it as an accessory use for your tenants? Or?
Absolutely. That is the only thing that we would allow in the building.
Now, all of these uses are limited to accessory uses. Right. They're not open to the general public, it says specifically.
And I apologize, I don't have the master design document in front of me, but I would say any of those that weren't retail, restaurant, food service related, we probably wouldn't do. We would not have a dry cleaner, more than likely. Daycare might be let me just start at the top of the list. Horticulture, absolutely not. Senior independent living, we probably would want to keep that open. Let me ask you this, are there any others on the list that might make it? Yeah.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
Janice will give you the 2 or 3 she'd like to leave.
Yeah, I could do it that way. No, I actually don't have too much of a problem with most of these. Some of them don't make a lot of sense to me, and actually, although I know you're in a hurry, if we could take 5 minutes, I could sit down with them and we go through these rather than have you all go through them with us. But and I'd be glad to do that if anybody wants to. But the adult daycare centers and things like that, I mean, that may be something you want to preserve.
Well, Janice, let me suggest if you and the applicant are willing to do that, we can put this off for a few minutes and you can go outside and go through the list and come back.
Be glad to.
And we'll pick your case up then.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, David.
Item 7 is PC 10310. It's an application by the 3rd Street Church of God and Bread, LLC, to rezone 9801 North Oklahoma Avenue from R1 Single Family to O2 General Office in Ward 7.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Our application is to rezone the R1 parcels you see outlined to O2 to facilitate the current office and medical complex uses that are out there. I would like to note that the R1 you see on the site plan, there are no R1 uses in this area. It's all commercial or office type uses. The staff has recommended approval, and we're here to answer any questions.
This will be just medical office development. It will be a hospital. What will it be?
We'll have to come back in with a specific plan for a special permit, but we anticipate it to be an extension of the hospital and the medical office to the south.
Commissioners, no one signed up.
I move approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 7. Cast your votes. And 7 is approved.
Item 8 is a companion item, CE 828, which is to close some streets and alleyways in the same area.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I apologize. Also with me is Tim Johnson, Johnson Associates. This is a companion item. This is closing the alleys and streets within the area that we just rezoned. Once again, staff is in support, and we own the land surrounding it. And we would ask for your support, and are here to answer any questions.
Okay, Dwight Butler signed up. Dwight, do you want to have a question? Like your shirt.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Dwight Butler with Anchor Engineering. I actually represent an adjacent landowner on this item, and he just wanted it clarified that when the right-of-way is in fact vacated, he gets his half.
By law, he'll get it to the center line.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other discussion, Commissioners?
I move approval of application.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item 8. Cast your votes. And we need to take Janice's light off for this one. She didn't vote. She's not here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9 is CE 826. This is an application by RICO LLC to close a portion of drainage and utility easement in North Gate Addition, Ward 7.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Brian Kuhn with Kuhn Engineering. Just trying to close this easement. We're going to relocate some utilities and the drainage ditch that goes through there to create a facility to be able to build on that area. There's no TEs, and we request approval.
I like your shirt, too.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
So Dwight, Brian,
You're going to relocate the sanitary sewer that's going
Yes,
under?
yes, sewer, gas, electric, there's about 6 utilities in there, every one of them. Yes, sir.
No approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 9. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Thank you. Item 10 is CE 827. This is an application by Central Oklahoma United Methodist Retirement Facility to also close a portion of a water line easement in Epworth Villa, Ward 8.
For the record, Brian Kuhn with Kuhn Engineering, representing the applicant. Not the same thing, but kind of the same thing. There's an existing easement, the existing water line. They are getting ready to add on to their facilities. Actually had the groundbreaking this morning at 11 o'clock. So no TEs, will request approval.
And no one signed up.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item 10. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Thank you. Item 11 is CE 825. This is an application by Abul Fazl Galasilki to close a portion of an alley in Block 61 of the Industrial Addition in Ward 6.
Good afternoon. My name is Sam Senamora. I represent the owner. This is an alleyway, and the owner owns both sides of this alleyway, and he'd like to get that vacated.
Okay. We understand from protest information we've received that the alley is used by other property owners to the north of you.
Yes, but the alley, they have access from north or southwest 28th, and also access from Agnew to that location.
Well, we do have someone signed up to talk to us, True Osborne and Dean Dice.
While they're coming up, I have a question. If this is closed, this half block of the alley, you say they have access, I see that, but if I'm trying to navigate a truck through there, I'm not going to be able to turn that truck, am I?
I don't, if you got an 18-wheeler, no, but if Mr. Osborne, I think he owns that business right there on the corner. He has access on Agnew and also 28th, so he can have trucks come and go on Agnew or 28th.
I guess the point is, though, the turnaround in there
wouldn't allow you to make.
Wouldn't allow you. I mean, in that context, just looking at the picture, it seems like they'd have to come in from Agnew, go, I guess, east, and then back around, if it's even possible, which doesn't appear to me to be possible from the picture that's in front of us. It seems to me the most logical way for everybody to go is straight north-south, in, out. And it seems to me to be a pretty significant hardship to the business owners to the east and west to close this alleyway to consolidate that property there.
Well, let's hear from Mr. Osborne and Dean.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dean Dyes, 4436 Northwest 36th, Commercial Permits Express. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Osborne this afternoon. And first of all, I want to start out by correcting the gentleman. There is no access from Agnew at all to this alley. The alley goes straight from 29th to 28th. It does go back to the east down to Young's, but it does not go to Agnew at all. The property there's a building on the northwest corner of that site plan there, and there's property in between that building and this man's property, but that is for a cell tower, so that's already been used. And when Mr. Hensley made his comment a minute ago, you cannot come off of 28th and turn that corner and go east. There's not enough room there to make that. So we have 12 other people in that same area that have signed up that is also not for this as well. But Mr. Osborne is here, and I would appreciate him coming forward. He's been in that area a long time, and he has something to share with you.
Mr. Osborne, give us your name and address for the record, please.
True Osborne, 2900 South Agnew.
Thank you.
We have two trash trucks that have to come in there and empty dumpsters. One is mine and one is my neighbor. There's no way they can turn around if they block that alley off. We have semis that
pull in that alley from 29th to drop off products for my business. And if he shuts that off, I don't know how a semi can pull in off of 28th and back out of that alley or turn around. The utilities run up and down that alley, the gas line and the sewer line. That's an asphalt alley. All the other alleys is grass. That alley runs east and west. That's just a dirt alley. I'd just like to keep that open.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Hensley. Our practice is not to close active alleys as a general practice for the Planning Commission.
Right. And additionally, we got that residential. The only way, if you use this dirt alley, as Mr. Osborne has described it, that sends truck traffic down behind residential property. It looks like it just doesn't make any sense for us to do this, John. I agree with you.
Any other discussion, Commissioners? A motion?
I move to deny.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to deny item 11. Cast your votes. And the item is denied.
Thank you very much.
The alley remains open.
Thank you very much.
Item 12 is C6333 is the preliminary plat of Lone Oak East in Ward 8.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Brian Kuhn with Kuhn Engineering. I'm handing out just a summary of the technical evaluations and our responses, just so they'll be, I'm told a lot of times I talk too fast, so I did this so they could write down what I said. So, again, you've heard this numerous times.
Any chance you could have had this by last Friday so we could have studied it?
Those are just your TEs that were from the staff report.
That's true, okay.
And they're the same things we said last time with one addition. And I wanted to show you something first that we talked about last time at length. And it'll be the point that we got us stuck last time, is the road to 164th. This is my original layout of what we were going to do on this property. By doing tracks, we come in the south down here, obviously, with our main road. We talked about doing something similar that we did over at Lone Oak to the west. So Tim and Butch and I all sat down and said, okay, let's divide this property that we're trying to do in about half. So we came up with a spine road through the middle. We've tried and tried and tried to come out to this north end to get to 164th. 164th at this point is under the floodway, flood water by about a half a foot. That's not much, but it's enough that I don't want to feel responsible of saying, I want cars to exit that way, but you may be in a flooded condition. So I don't want that to happen. Even Curtis with Stormwater came up to me last meeting and said, hey, can you try this? And I said, I've tried and tried, and hopefully we'll figure something out. But, so we came, instead of doing this, we came over here because we knew that someday this was going to be done with Portland and the widening here and what's happening with the highway department. So we came over here, I have a traffic circle here, I put another traffic circle here, and I went straight north to 164th. So from the beginning, we had a plan of getting out to here. 2 entrances, plus there will be more coming this way in the future. Okay, this is where our channel was going to be relocated, which in your staff report it talked about we're going to cross the channel numerous times. We're really only crossed it one time. So this, it's just an exhibit showing this was always our intent. We knew we were going to have to get out there someday. One of the things that we do and what I do is we do things, there's a term in this business called orderly development. You do things in order. You come here, you do what we did here, you come here, so we've done that. Our preliminary plat, in our opinion, conforms to all the PUD zoning. I know we talked at the end of the meeting, Mr. Bright said, I know you have your zoning, but. So we comply with the PUD zoning. We comply with the city design guidelines. We're also in compliance with all the regulations and the city's design guidelines. We were asked to do a flood study. We've done that. We were asked to do a traffic study. We've done that. It's been submitted. I'll just get right to the TEs. TE number 1, of course, we agree to that. That's one that we say we'll agree with all the engineering comments. We'll do those. Number 2, pretty much the same as last time. We understand that we need Portland widened, and we understand we need 150th widened. So what we've said and all we're adding in that is that the street needs to be under construction, complete or substantially complete at this level. Because they're already out there. I was out there today. They're relocating gas lines. It's happening now. So I just want to add the word under construction in front of complete or substantially complete.
And the same thing for Portland. We know we need those streets widened. And also that we're going to we will reevaluate the traffic study at 379 and to determine if there may be some other needs that we need to do something more than what they've already planned on doing. So we want to follow the traffic study and whatever it may say too. When we did the traffic study, we had no input on the results of that traffic study. It was done by an independent engineering company. We didn't say, we want you to set these parameters. You just do it, tell us what the answers are, and we'll live with that. TE number 3, we agree with. TE number 4, we agree with the following change in the wording, that we will share 50% of the cost of the widening improvements on 150th for our left turn lane into Drive A. If we have not moved forward in the next 3 years, we don't want to be paying for any widening or return lanes that will not benefit us in any way if we don't go forward with development. So we'll do it. If we're you'll see a plat hopefully soon, and at that point that'll trigger that we'll pay for half those improvements. 5 and 6 we agree. Let's move on to 8, I agree with, and number 9, we don't agree. Number 9 is the one about rezoning the entire property R1. We've already got R1 zoning. Existing Oak plats to the west, we just put a note on the final plat that says all these houses will be single family, and it's worked fine for that subdivision. I think staff can go either way on that deal. Number 7 is the issue of taking the road to the north out to 164th. There's been a lot of talk about this. The traffic study says that it needs to happen as soon as you complete 692 homes or lots. The TE says that you do it after you do 379. We agree to do it. We agree to do that at that time. We want to do a new traffic study at that time, though, but no way will we allow it to go past 692 without putting that road in, no matter what the traffic study says. So last time we were talking about you never want to put the road in. You may never put it in. We will put it in. We will commit at 692, which is what the traffic study says. Okay? But at 379, we will stop, and we will look at the traffic study again, see if anything else has changed. So the only thing that's changed from last meeting is we will commit to doing that road at a certain level, which is what the traffic study says. Be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Just on that last bit,
okay,
Brian, in our earlier conversations on 379, building the road at 164th, the concern last time expressed that we might never get that. How does the language that you have proposed affect the traffic study saying when we reevaluated at 379 that says, actually we said 692, but on further review, and we've looked at this again, we need it at 580.
At 379?
Or 420.
Exactly.
Some number.
At 379, with TE, the staff has come up with at 379 you should do this road. Okay?
Right.
The traffic study says you should do it after 692.
Right.
What we're saying is we'll stop at 379. Let's look at the study again.
Right.
And we'll do what the study says. But let's say the study says...
But you're setting I get it. You're putting a collar on the top.
Because last time there was no top.
Of 692.
Right, and that's what the traffic study says.
So it's traffic study, recommendation, or 692, whichever is the earliest.
Yeah. If there's, for example, if there's a bunch of development goes on 164th in the next 3 or 4 years,
right,
that traffic study may come back and say you need to do it at 380.
Right.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from Stuart. I mean, since we have the staff's recommendation, I think we should hear from Stuart. I mean, we get a traffic study, it's submitted, it's then reviewed by our traffic engineering staff, and if they have a different view, I think we need to hear that. I think that's the point of having the traffic study and having it reviewed. Stuart, were you following what was discussed and then my comment?
Well, all except for the last 7 seconds, since there's a little bit of a video delay.
Okay. Well, what I'm interested in hearing is your evaluation of the traffic study. In other words, they submit a traffic study to us for review, comment, and evaluation, and we're on TE number 7.
All right. Well, with respect to a traffic study and when certain roadway improvements are called out, you know, they had sub-consulted that work out to another engineering firm that specializes in that form of work. So that engineer devised a a system whereby they looked at traffic impacts by dividing the entire proposed development into about 6 parcels, or into 6 major sections. I mean, that's not necessarily going to be platted sections, but they just broke it into 6 sections based on a number of houses. The way this study is written, I mean, the connection point to Northwest 164th Street could be done really at any point in time along, with this development. It's not necessarily tied to a certain level where it says that, your 2 access points on 150th Street are only going to be able to take so much of the traffic from the development of this addition before you have to provide a third. I mean, this particular addition could probably function. It may not function as well as it could based on limited access if it's all tied to 150th Street. But, having better access, for connectivity to 164th Street would be beneficial. Now, to say that a study is going to come back and say definitively, yes, we must have another access point, and this one goes out onto 164th Street, I mean, you could probably write a study to say that one does need to be there, and you could probably just as equally write a study that says one does not need to be there. That connection where it leaves this particular property, goes out to the east and then north on 164th Street is also there if you read through the report, they're provided there to provide access for the additional tract of land which is off to the east of Lone Oak East, which is, I think, currently zoned for R4, I believe. It's for like apartments and that level of development. So that access point that goes out, onto 164th Street provides not just another point of access for Lone Oak East, but it provides access for the adjacent undeveloped properties.
Okay. So will you be comfortable with what Brian has proposed as an alternative to the TE that's in our staff report?
Knowing what I know about what's going to come with respect to the timing of public improvements, with the city's plans to do work on 150th Street and with the state's plans to do work on State Highway 74 or Portland Avenue, there's no work in the area planned for like Northwest 164th Street. And in that regard, having access to that road sooner rather than later is going to be a benefit to all the residents that that will ultimately occupy the Lone Oak East addition, simply because they won't be subjected to quite the level of traffic impacts as they would if the only access for the development is tied to 150th Street. Okay. So, I think getting a subsequent traffic impact study would not necessarily find that there's a certain point in time, a magical point in time, or a magic number of lots where it says we have to provide, access to 164th. It could just as easily be rewritten to say, well, we'll provide a third point of access also onto 150th Street.
Okay. Any questions of Stuart, Commissioners? Ginny Mastian has signed up to speak.
My name is Jenny Massian. I'm sorry. Address is 14405 Fossil Creek Lane, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I'm a resident in Remington neighborhood. Remington is definitely not the only one involved in this, and we have over 400 signature pages here for a petition which has been submitted to the Planning Commission in hopes that this will be denied in its current form. Again, we're not against the development type, but in the form of the development, because we can see that we're going to be significantly negatively impacted, and we're concerned. We are extremely concerned and committed to this effort to avoid being forced to deal with the impact that we may be facing. I won't go through the whole list, but I can tell you that about all of the Lone Oak neighborhoods are involved, the existing ones, Remington and Monticello. It's significant. And what you hear is just a compressed version, and I know I miss a lot because I get told things afterwards, maybe you want to mention this next time. So You're hearing a lot of information, but not nearly what I'm hearing, and not with the depth of sentiment and concern that is presented to me. I've spent a lot of time in person and on phone and verbal or written communication, and I can tell you that it's a deep, deep concern. First of all, of course, there's the traffic concerns, and I know traffic studies show certain things, and one of the maps, I think it's the third page in what I gave you, shows in the red highlighted on the roads there, that shows the backup at different times of days. It goes pretty close to a mile coming out of our neighborhoods as we go east. It's really bad. The 150th and Portland intersection has been a great concern, and we've worked with that light. We've worked with Stuart and his department on that light. We barely get a turn lane as we're going north, a turn light. In fact, we didn't have one for a while, and it was, people felt like they were taking their life into their own hands to take that left turn. So we were given, and we were agreeable with, getting just a moment of turn that one or two cars can fit through to make that left turn. And, you know, that gives us a chance. We have to be patient, but it protects our lives if we're willing to wait for that light. The back up of that traffic far exceeds 1 mile many times during the rush hours. Going north, when people are coming from the north to the south, that backup goes on and on and on. On 150th, it's a growing line because there's developments out to the west that use 150th. The backup continually grows. If we're putting this much traffic on, it's going to grow further. And several Monticello residents have expressed concern. They say it's almost impossible to turn out there at many times of day without feeling in jeopardy. Now, if we're loading more cars on there, we've now put their lives in jeopardy by adding that. Now, we realize that this development probably will happen prior to the widening of Northwest 150th and prior to the widening of Portland. So we're just asking for the bare minimum, not for convenience. It's going to be inconvenient no matter what. We're asking for life-saving steps to install a signal at Remington Way and Northwest 150th pretty early in that stage. We've put a number in our petition that coincided with some numbers that had been brought up. Our preference is that it would be installed before any of those houses were actually lived in. But that won't happen either. So we're trying to be reasonable in our requests, but we don't feel like it's unreasonable at all. Yes, it's expensive to install a light before the street's widened, and then again to revise or install a light after that street's widened. But without that light, you're going to have a few things. One thing, Monticello in life-threatening situations, and another thing is that Remington residents will probably have an impossible time turning left to take their children to school, and therefore they will be turning right to go out of Remington to get their kids over to the elementary school, and they'll have to probably turn right at Portland and turn right at Memorial, go down 2 miles, and then go north on MacArthur to get to the school in a safe manner, since they probably will not be able to take that left turn, or at least not with the numbers that need to go. The North Collector Street that's been discussed and going to Northwest 164th, there's been some large numbers mentioned in that. And to us, again, that needs to be an escape route because there's going to be so much backup on Northwest 150th that without that Collector Street, Monarch East doesn't have an alternative. It's backed up, so they're going to be coming out into backed up. And I realize that jog in that street while the short route is in floodway, that it makes, or in floodplain, it makes it hard to and expensive to install that other street. But we feel that it's a necessity so that there is an alternative. Otherwise, it's forced to be on 150th. There is no alternative. So, we're just, and we're held captive. This isn't a choice that we have being in some of these residential areas. We have single exits. We have single choices. Most of the other concerns, as the turn lanes along 150th going in and out of Monticello and out of and Remington and Lone Oak East, those will probably be covered, as been discussed during the widening, and some of the light things would be taken care of. So those will just have to be patient and work with. The additional thing is that during this construction, we're going to have not only the problem we have now, but construction always causes traffic backup. So now we're talking about more traffic problems. Again, that's an inconvenience part. The stoplight part is a life-threatening part. That's what we want to really enforce. We also have more people that would be going into the Lone Oak, or the Deer Creek Elementary School. And again, that's an unsafe area. We're hoping that gets taken care of even prior to this development, but that is some concern that needs to be addressed, because if this development happens without more safe measures around the Deer Creek Elementary School, then we may see some child accidents there, and car accidents or pedestrian accidents. Again, there's the flood concerns. Now, we have been advised again and again by multiple sources, and we'll submit to that the proposed changes to Bluff Creek and the channelization that is to happen otherwise will be sufficient to handle the water flow. But the provision is that it needs to be maintained, because once it's done and it's turned over to the homeowners association, then if somebody's not watching over that to check it, to make sure that all the riprap is not displaced during flooding and debris is not collected in that floodway, if there's not the requirement to monitor or the financial sources to remedy or monitor, then it sounds like we can be pretty assured that we're going to experience blockage and flooding at some point in the future. And this is not something that we feel that we should, those of us who do back up against Bluff Creek or that drive over the flood waters on the roads, that it's fair to inflict that on us and us have no choices. I put an example of pushing a car into a slow oncoming intersection in the letter that we did to the mayor. But I feel like somebody is pushing us into an intersection and saying, well, you're not going to get hit because it's slow traffic, and we'll be careful to tell them to go around you. But if they hit you, don't worry, you have car insurance. Well, flood insurance is not going to, replace our home values or our sentimental values. Everything is not going to be the same if we get flooded. And we feel like without the proper measures in place and the finances in place to keep the flooding from happening down the line, that we're being pushed into this flood intersection. The other thing is that I don't know how much the school system can come into play on your decision here, but I feel like not only in this subdivision or this proposed development, but many like it, that we're doing our city and our community a terrific injustice to put density like this in other areas without everything being in place and ready. Deer Creek School is an excellent school and got a wonderful reputation, and that's probably why everybody wants to come and build there. But we're going to change that, and we're going to take it down like Edmond's headed down right now, unfortunately, and I hate to say that, but housing keeps getting approved, and the schools get flooded, and they're not having the scholastical standings that they used to have, is my understanding, and we don't want that to happen to Deer Creek or any other school in Oklahoma City or even in the state of Oklahoma. We want to make ourselves better, not worse, and whatever any of our city members or staff can do to protect that, and our developers, we would feel like that's for the benefit of not just us, but all of us. We've got the city plan takes us in good directions, and I understand that the developers and this proposed development are not required to comply with those suggestions of the city plan because it was zoned prior to the city plan. They were zoned, I believe, in 1999, and so they're exempt from requirements, possibly. I don't know that for sure. But then we have a little bit of a problem with that, because when they were zoned in 1999, I've been told by multiple sources within Remington that the developer then, or representatives, met with representatives of Remington, and there were verbal commitments made and agreements made that certain criteria would be done in order that Remington would not protest the zoning at that time. I've been told that all of those commitments or verbal contracts or whatever they were are not being met with this proposed development. It may be our loss because it was not put in writing as a contract, and so I don't know, but it seems wrong somehow that somebody can zone something and then switch it to something else. It's not a good example for negotiations for future developments, I don't think. The density complications are multifold and extreme, and it's the petitioner's desire that the density somehow be reduced in this and it be an asset to the city, and that the timing of each of the stages be set so that it's a minimal hazard and reasonable inconveniences. And density, however it's reduced is fine. We, either reduce the area where the lots are built, or make larger lots, or install, preferably even, install common areas throughout the subdivision and give our city some more aesthetic appeal. That's something that the city plan is hoping for throughout all developments. I think I probably have left out some things, but I think that you understand our passion behind this, our concerns. We do want to be reasonable, but we don't want to be we're not a willing victim. We may be an unwilling victim, and we're asking you, please, to protect us in that, and we plead to all powers that be that we be protected in this, and that our city be protected in this, and I thank you for letting me go on like that.
Hey, Brian, are there any, and you may have said this and I missed it, for Northwest 150th, is there a time frame when that's supposed to be widened?
By 2015. In 2015. And one of the things about our traffic study that it talks about, it always assumes that 150th is never widened in our traffic study. So all the numbers you're looking at assume that Portland stays as is and 150th stays as is. One of the things that we've agreed to on TE number 3 is we've agreed to pay for half that light when the city says it's needed. Okay? What we will also commit from today, from the floor, is if Remington wants it earlier than that, we'll commit to 50% of it if they can figure out the other 50%. And we'll do it whenever we do our first plat, which we're hoping is in the next couple of months. So we want that light too. and we're willing to commit to pay for half of it, either half with the city or half with them if the city says it's not warranted. But the TE says as soon as the city says it's warranted, we're good to go for half that. One of the things that she's mentioned that I do want to comment on is blockages in that creek. The county cleaned it out not very long ago, but I can promise you if we have homeowners living along that creek and there's blockages, we're going to be more concerned with those blockages than they will. So our homeowners association is going to see that blockage before anybody else does. We're downstream from them. It will affect us before it affects them. So our homeowners association, the developer, is going to be taking care of that because it's to our benefit before it's to their benefit, if that makes sense. I think, just again, on the traffic light, we're willing to commit to that, at least half of that cost.
Brian, I got a couple of questions, and I know we talked about this at the last meeting. The road going out to 164th, that's a permanent, will be a permanent collector street?
Yes.
Okay. And you told me in the last meeting that would be less expensive to take it out the way you're showing rather than taking it out at the north end of that development?
No, I didn't say that. No, you may not have been here when I first started today. I tried to. We've done this we've been working on this traffic study for probably a year, maybe. And originally, we talked about taking it out here because this is all flood zone, floodway. Okay? So we went back and said, can we go straight here, which is right at the north end. The problem is 164th is underwater by about a half a foot in 100-year rain. I don't want to be sending cars out into a flooded condition. We could put a sign up here that says do not enter, area subject to flooding, but you all probably have never done it, but I know some people that will say, it can't be that bad, so I'm going to go ahead and go that way because they don't want to turn around and go a different way. So we've tried. Your staff has helped us try to do that. We will continue. This is a whole lot cheaper for us, no doubt.
Okay.
So we're going to continue to try that. If something happens downstream, there's some work happening down here. Another engineer here that's working on another project right here that we're helping with the flood study. If we can get this water surface down, hey, we'll go right out here. One other thing, I'll be brief. I know you've heard this too many times and you're tired of it. Two things. In the TEs, I'm sorry, in the staff report, Stewart's finally commented in his summary. Finally, the Traffic Management Division recommends that the study be updated if noteworthy changes to the overall development concept are made, or if the time frame goes beyond 2022. We know something probably will go beyond 22, but I think in here he's saying, hey, if there's some changes, let's look at it. Let's all look at it, because again, we may be at 400 instead of 692. And one other comment, in the traffic study, Phase 4, by the time Phase 4 is completed, which is 692, site-generated traffic will approach the geometric capacity of 150th. We recommend you go to 164th. That's when 692 are developed and built on. We're saying when we plat 692, which is probably 2 years before they're built on. Okay? So we've gone I think we've gone a little bit ahead of what the traffic study wants us to do. But again, we want to know the facts at the time we develop. One of the things that she said, and I think one of the things you do have, is when we come back with final plats, there's some things in the comprehensive plan that have now been instigated into final plats, which you'll be able to talk to us about. Common areas, parks, recreation space. We'll have to play by those rules now when we final plat. So there's some things in there that we will be looking at. So.
Well, I've got another question.
Okay, sorry.
On her proposal here, she's showing a temporary emergency access right down at the south end of the southeast corner of one of those lots there. Is that possible?
That is now a permanent. Can you scroll up or pan up? We now have that drawing is probably 3 or 4 months old. The driveway that comes down the east side of our subdivision goes out and it lines up with Monticello's Drive. That drawing right there is really old. So it's a permanent road coming out to so we have 2 permanent roads coming out to the south.
About 3 lots from the corner. Oh, okay, I see it. Okay, yeah, I see it. That's why it doesn't show up very good on these. No, it does not. You have to squint for that one.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Here's my comment.
Okay.
You opened your comments by saying, from the beginning, we wanted this road to 164th. And yet, you absolutely refuse to commit to any reasonable time frame for that road. And when I say reasonable time frame, I think there's two compelling reasons to build that road. If you'll recall, the staff originally asked at 160-something lots, not 300. They doubled that to get to TE7 to the 376 lots. There's two compelling reasons. One, not only are you dumping all the traffic onto 150th, anybody going to that school on 164th has to go down to 150th, loop around, and back up through the field. That does not make common sense. If you build a couple hundred houses, yeah, it's an inconvenience. When you get up to 376, you won't commit to a road. And then to add, pardon the pun, gasoline to the fire, I talked with our fire people on who's first in if there's a fire here. You know where they come from, the first engine in? They come from Pennsylvania, north of 164th. So they will want to run across 164th and enter into the north like they do when they service the rest of Lone Oak. But they'll have to loop down, flip around to 150th and come in from the south. And then Stewart just now added a third reason. He said, obviously, the sooner that road's in, the better for all residents. When we heard this the other day, you were steadfast with, well, we'll do a new traffic study, when we all know by the time the new traffic study's done, the roads will be improved and there won't be an additional requirement. But then your two applicants got up and each one of them backpedaled farther from the commitment for this road. It makes sense to build a road at 376. Will you please do that?
I think we've made our commitment that we'll do the study at 379, see what other facts are out there, see if anything's changed, but we'll definitely commit by 692.
Well,
Let me make a
go ahead,
Let me
Bob.
just comment a bit. I've heard everything that Commissioner Gales just said, but my position on this application hasn't really changed. And one of the issues is that this proposal and this project with 1,036 lots proposed is being proposed at a time when the infrastructure is not there to accommodate that. I know that we're talking about traffic studies, 379, 164, something like that. My position is that this should never be considered until the infrastructure is in place, ready to accommodate what it is you want to do. Very concerned about no access to 164th. That just makes no sense whatsoever, particularly because I just heard this from Commissioner Gales, what the fire department has to do to get to the place for a poor sap that's got a fire right smack in the middle of the southern part of this development. Unless you want to sprinkle everything, he's going to be in real deep trouble. So the density also is the issue of how many lots are on this location. It is inconsistent with the neighborhood, and the traffic study, I really didn't quite understand everything that Stewart was saying or how that fits in there, but I know, just looking at the application, looking at the density of your project, is that 150th Street right now with construction, with traffic, etc., new cars going through, trying to get to Deer Creek School, it just isn't going to work. I mean, it just isn't going to work right now. And then on the flooding part of it, we had a study session last time about neighborhoods that had neighborhood associations that were supposed to do things, and they don't. You have a large number of neighborhoods where there is a neighborhood association required to do cleaning up of the creek, etc., and these people want to pay their dues, and they don't want to mess with it. It's a problem with subdivisions, is getting an active neighborhood association to work together to do something as important as cleaning this creek or whatever it is so it doesn't flood the rest of these subdivisions that are out there. So my position is unchanged from last meeting. I really can't support it.
I've got one other question. Okay.
Good.
You say that it would be cheaper to build the road at the north. Okay,
We'd serve the
we'd
rest
rather
of-
do that in reality, okay? Why can't you leave the entrance where it's at, commit to go ahead and developing those lots along that road along the east, and take that the access out and put it in when you develop those lots up there? Wouldn't that be a lot shorter, a lot more efficient, and everything else?
To take it out the very north end of the subdivision?
No. Take it out to exactly where you've got it now.
On the south.
Okay? Go ahead and develop the street along the east side there, and take the road out exactly where you got it now, at the northeast side of the development.
We plan on doing that at a certain level.
But you've got the road drawn, the way you've got it drawn now, it's coming out, I wish I could get up there and actually show you.
I'll show you.
What-
Right here. You may not be able to see through this. The existing creek is shown on their wheels through here, okay?
Okay.
Two apartment tracks right here.
Okay.
So we're going to put this channel right here.
Okay.
Which will separate out our residential uses.
Okay.
From our industrial and commercial uses. That's why we got the way we have.
Okay, but why
If
can't,
we got moved it way over here, all I would say this much for pavement is all that.
Mhm.
If you put it here instead of here,
Mhm.
it would say that for pavement, but I thought it would be better to have apartments in front on this, and on this, and get this drive back this way.
up there where it curves, right there.
That's the edge of the subdivision.
No, yeah, right where your finger is. Take it straight out to where you've got it now. Not ready for.
Straight north from that point, is what he
Well,
said.
not straight north, northeast. There.
You can do that. You can do that. We're still to cross the creek. We cross it more than one time, and we're through more flood zone here. You have different routes here.
You're going through flood zone down there also.
Down here, I'm going to be putting the channel in here, so I'm going to cross it one time right here.
Because that's a speedway, that's going to be a speedway. That's a half a mile.
I know, we did this over here.
Yeah.
We talked about no houses fronting it. I think it serves the neighborhood pretty well. I don't know if there's been any accidents on that. Believe me, we're going to try to get this road out at the least cost we can. We're looking at everything we know. This flood study is a very complicated flood study. Every time we tweak something, it changes something else. So if we can happen here, and it's less expensive, we'll do it. But we're just saying we'll do it every time. It's a traffic 76. I know that Mr. Bright says that there's no infrastructure, but this, and your staff says there is, and there's certain limits as to when you have to do more things, and we're willing to follow those. So,
Mike, go ahead, and then Commissioner Gales.
I think we've got the issues framed. I think we've got the developers' suggestions. Let's vote. I mean, we've got 2.5 hours in this application, and so I don't think Brian and these guys they've made their best offer. So I don't think it's going to get better. I don't think it's going to get worse. So let's do our job. Is my suggestion.
Mike, I agree, and I'm going to make a motion. I will point out one final irony. We have a subdivision requirement for quarter section connectivity, and obviously this plat is a mile long, and it connects the quarter sections north to south. Isn't it ironic that we have quarter section connectivity requirements and no requirement to connect to the section line road? With that said, and what I've said before, I think there's actually some public safety issues here with getting the school traffic to the school and the fire response path. Without that road, I can't support the application. I'll move for denial.
Second. Before we vote, I'd like to make an editorial comment, and that is that I think when we sit here and take action, we've got a responsibility to the property owner and the applicant who comes before us. We've got an equal responsibility to the property owners in that area and the impacts on them as well. And there's a citywide policy that's one of my favorite things to read, and we don't look at it often enough. It says, review uses for their impacts on surrounding development and determine which uses may need tighter controls to minimize impacts. And I can't support this either. Now, the motion is for denial, so a vote yes is deny the application. Cast your votes. It is denied without that TE7. We'll go back now to case 19, Janice, and our applicant from Texas. What have you agreed to, or have you?
We'd like to thank Commissioner Powers for her input on this. In talking with staff and Ms. Powers, the couple of uses, there are a couple of uses in here we want to strike, those being, well, let me say the first one was horticulture. We do not want to strike it, but we want to amend it to say limited to floral shop use only. We're not going to do any tree no garden centers, no tree farms, none of that. And if that falls under a retail use, we'll absolutely could strike it. Animal sales and services, grooming, we would like to strike. And the last two to strike would be repair services, consumer, and multifamily residential. Multifamily residential is a main use of this property.
Wouldn't be.
Yeah. The last two items is about middle of the list. There's two listings for automotive. Those both we would ask that those be used to main use. This is not because the parking structure is a required part of making this property work. And the parking lot, absolutely, we need what we have for parking already. So. They are not parking structures open to the public. Right. No. The parking lot would be for visitors and that kind of thing. That would be it.
JJ, would not that be part of the specific site plan and also a requirement based upon the residential use applied for? So you really don't need those listed separately. I don't know that it makes any difference, but you'd have to do that anyway.
Right. And absolutely we would, because our business wouldn't work without it. Right. The last item that we were discussing before we came back is we would like to request the striking of this in the paragraph that is prior to the limited uses. The paragraph says the following uses shall be permitted provided they do not collectively occupy more than 15% of the floor area of the building and are devoted to serving the tenants of the building and not marked to the general public. We would ask that we strike from "and" to the end of that sentence because the Tiffany PD that currently exists allows for marketing to the general public. If we were to have a retail use or some sort of coffee shop or something like that, we need to be able to, it wouldn't make sense for a tenant to come rent space from us to offer those services if they couldn't market to the public.
I don't know why we want to restrict that. It makes no sense if there's a Starbucks in the bottom of the building to restrict it to use only by the residents.
I'll tell you why. It's one thing for a Starbucks, but there are a lot of uses in this list. I'm sorry if we miscommunicated about this. There are a lot of uses in this list that it would not be okay with me to have open to the public, including liquor store and, full sit-down restaurant and laundry services and things like that. And there are uses that you're talking about. If you're limiting them to 15% and they're for your tenants, that's one thing. But to have those uses in this kind of a structure that are open to the public and marketed to the public, that would be a completely different thing. Starbucks, that's not a big deal, or a coffee shop of any kind. How many people are going to find their way to Tiffany's to go to a coffee shop? But other kinds of uses, that would be problematic for me.
But there's already a restaurant in the Tiffany.
Well, there used to be, but there used to be. Yes.
Right.
Realistically, if they were open, I'm not saying they should be open to the public, but if they were open to the public, where is the public going to come from to patronize this location? Unless it's from the from the tenant.
There's a hotel nearby.
Somebody may defect from the office building down the street, I guess. But basically, we have an apartment on the side. I don't think the amusement crowd and the restaurant to the north is going to come over there. Are we making too much of an issue of this, I guess is my question.
Just as a policy, I mean, look, it seems to me that we were quite thrilled to get commercial development in place of a beat-down office building and a car dealership that existed for many years on this corner. And I don't know why we would discourage those type. And we're all about neighborhood commercial, where you walk to the restaurant in your neighborhood and you do things like that. Why would we restrict that to the tenants only? It seems incongruous with our overall policy, and maybe I don't understand.
Mixed use is what we're encouraging as a general premise.
And you've got a Dave and Buster's next door. I mean,
but on
a hotel.
On another, like the practicality of it is that you're about to develop a multi-storied residential tower with, lots of money invested, et cetera. And I just can't imagine that down there at the basement part where the commercial part is, you're going to allow something to come in there that the residents that you want to rent to, that's the lifeblood of paying off the mortgage, are going to be offended by what's going on downstairs.
You're absolutely correct.
Not going to happen. I mean, just the practicality of it is, when I got this, actually, Janice, I like the elimination of some of those things. I think what you did was good. But as far as marketing, as far as having business and mixed use, et cetera, in a residential development that's multi-stories, it seems incongruous that you would allow some really bad thing going on with loud noises and fireworks going on that disturbs your tenants. Not going to happen. I assume that's the way it's going to be managed.
That would be detrimental to our business.
It would be.
Tenants would be moving out.
Anything else, commissioners?
I do have a couple of other questions. We talked specifically about how many signs we're talking about for this property. They are going to keep the signs they have, including the one on the top of the building. They're eliminating electronic message display and non-accessory signs, so I mean that's very clear. But it's a little less clear how many new freestanding signs they would be allowed. I understood that we were agreeing that there would be no more than 2, and that there would be no more than 1 attached sign other than the existing ones.
I think the only thing I'd respectfully ask is that we be allowed more than 1 attached sign when it comes to marketing that retail or accessory use, if that's necessary. And it would be at the ground floor,
Monument?
No, it wouldn't be a monument. It might be a sign attached to the building, but it would be at the ground floor. It's not going to be something way up high that's 6-foot tall letters or of that nature.
And you think you need another one besides that?
Well, that sign would not be marketing Tiffany, the residential.
And also besides the one you already have?
Which other sign?
Didn't you tell me there's already an attached sign to the building?
There may be one on the porte cochere at the front of the building, but it's going to, it's small. It's not illuminated, I don't believe. The main sign we definitely want to keep is the rooftop sign. It's a landmark, and we realize that, and we want to make good use of it.
So if you have the one on the roof, and you have the one on the porte cochere...
Yeah, and the only other sign we would have is one that would be for use by the accessory use, not for us.
So
if we had a dry cleaner... It would be attached to the building, yes, not freestanding.
And that's what I understood we had agreed to. So.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question I had really maybe more of a question for staff, and that is under density, it says that there are 247 units, And then it goes on to say that the allowable amount of units and allowable density may be adjusted not to exceed 20% of the proposed units. So we're talking about, of the 20%, we're talking about the 117 units, additional units they're proposing, and that can vary by as much as 20%. So it could be another 20 units. Okay.
Is that a requirement based on going from 2 beds to 1 bed and changing floor plan type?
It could be. We're in the process of designing the unit layouts now, and the thing can fluctuate wildly. We're studying our market studies and trying to adjust that. That's what this is based on. So that we're not. I've done multiple PDs in the past, and I just don't want to get so locked down that we have to come back to you guys and say, hey, well, we got this thing planned out and we added 15 units to the deal. It's not worth your time or mine to come back.
They're changing the footprint.
We're not changing the footprint.
Okay. Or height.
Or height.
Right.
Is there anybody who signed up to speak?
No.
I'll move approval.
As revised?
As conditioned, as changed, as modified? Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 19 as modified. Cast your votes.
Thank you.
And it's approved. Janice, you're voting. Thank you.
We're going to have time to get to Dallas, hopefully.
David, thank you for your patience. We're back to
item 13.
Oh, no, we got to go back to David.
By the way, I wanted to say good luck.
Okay.
I was the patient one.
Oh, well, thank you.
We've heard enough from David.
Well, there's always that.
Item 13 is C-6338, which is the final plat of Heritage Oaks Addition Section 6 in Ward 8.
Good afternoon. Chris Anderson with SMC Consulting Engineers, 815 West Main, representing the developer. We've read the staff report, agree with all the TEs, and request approval of the plat.
No one has signed up. Commissioners, you agree with all the TEs? Chris?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm confused. There is a comment in here from the fire department that they object to the development of this phase until Section 3 is completed and completion will satisfy the requirements to establish in the subdivision reg. I don't see that clearly enunciated in the TE. Can somebody help me?
That's number 3 on the TEs.
Final plat will not go forward until Section 3 is done?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that clearly cover that?
Yeah, by agreeing to the TE.
Well, I understand, but does TE 3 clearly address that?
Yeah.
Move approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 13. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 14 is PUD 1460, an application by Psycho LLC to rezone 11,700 Southwest 15th Street from PUD 82 to PUD 1460 in Ward 3.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, David Seiler. What we have is a unique situation in that we have an existing mobile home development that's been in place since 1983. It's currently zoned by PUD 82, and the current PUD lacks language that will allow my client to get the necessary state license to sell mobile homes. Now, it is worth noting that in the past, the previous owners of this development have sold mobile homes from it. It's just, for whatever reason now, the state is making a different interpretation. So what we're asking for is to rezone it to only add the ability to sell the mobile homes. Now, we're going to further limit that to there will only be 10 mobile homes for sale at any one time, and those homes have to be located on existing lots. So there won't be a general population where there's a sales area and you're going to have a bunch of homes stacked. They have to be in existing lots, so from the outside public, it won't change at all. It'll just look like there may be a new addition to the neighborhood, and it's for sale. This is one where there was some protest, and there was a neighborhood meeting that was held by another lawyer in our office, and the sense I got from the meeting was the neighbors weren't necessarily in protest of what we were doing, but the notice they received, the wording of the use unit that we were asking for caused them some concern. We did provide them with our PUD and explained to them what we were doing and how we were limiting the uses, and they seem to be fine with that. I'm not sure if they are here, but if they are, that they can explain it. But from what I'm told, they don't have any protest of what it is we're actually trying to do.
David, is my understanding correct that there are 82 lots in this development and that there could be in that development up to 10 lots with units for sale? Kind of interspersed like they would be in a neighborhood if I lived on the street and there was a house down the street that was for sale?
Absolutely. I think it's actually 157 lots, but we're not adding any lots, but you are correct. It would be as if a home in your neighborhood went up for sale.
Okay, well, I'm just reading our staff report, and it says 82, oh, PUD 82, excuse me. I was confusing that with the number of lots.
Yes. But yes, you're correct in your interpretation. It'll be just like any other neighborhood. It'll look like there's just a home for sale in the neighborhood.
Okay. We do have one person signed up. Mr. McFadden?
Eddie McFadden, 11901 Southwest 17th Street, Yukon.
And you understand what they're asking for?
Pardon?
You do understand what he's asking for?
I do.
Okay.
But I yesterday became aware of the Planning Commission's report on this, and I took a look at it, and there was a lot of holes that I'd like to address in that plan. First thing is that no disrespect to the Planning Commission, I just don't think they spent the time they needed to go out and look at this. If you look at your map up there, I live in the middle of the top homes on the south border of in the middle there, and I'm going to first address the fencing, or what I think is called the screening issue. Just to the west, southwest of that south border line, that's about 350 foot of fence. Out of that 350 foot of fence, 113 feet of it is missing in 6 locations. Then there's another 68 feet of that fence on that line that at 20 locations that need repair. In other words, gaping holes in it. The developer has reluctantly built houses there because of the eyesore of those. Most of the track is built out on Wheatfield, on 18th Street, and no houses have been put along that line yet. He's hoping to get the track, I think, pretty well built out before he starts building houses against that. So, and going to the middle, you'll see where my house is at. You'll see a middle section there. That fence, I call it the middle of the south border, is in bad need of repair where people can come and go. My neighbor just a year ago got broken into. They had a meth bus lab in that park, and they found 2 of his TVs that were stolen a year ago in that meth bus lab there. So having access into our properties is not real. And to the west of the south border, the fence is fine. On the west side of the border, there is absolutely no fencing at all or screening. So that addresses the big concern of most of the people that signed the petition for 41 against it. The parks, I noticed that the Parks and Recreation didn't even address or respond to this request. If you go look at the sad shape of the little park that they've got up near their office, there's 5 pieces of equipment. One of them is 4 swings. 3 of those swings don't work. There's only 1 swing in operation. I think the Parks Department would have been embarrassed to know if you wanted to go to a public park, you would have to go 2 miles up to Wood Run. So there's no parks there, and I think that the equipment that they have there, they have a little climbing gym that's about 8 foot high, a small slide, some chin-up bars, the broken swings, and I forget, let me say, I probably had notes, but I think that's why the Parks Department didn't even bother addressing the issue. The school district, I talked to the construction manager of Mustang Schools. They said, when we get involved in rezoning issues or things of that nature, it's a political football, so we don't do anything. I can tell you firsthand, working as a volunteer at the school there at Mustang Trails that my daughter goes to, they are totally in favor because they've got already enough traffic problems there on 15th Street. And as you well know, 15th is still 2 miles off. The other issue I found interesting, it said that a flood plan was going to have to be submitted. And I don't think it was submitted because in the middle of the park there's a grade break, and it runs east to west, and from the easterly direction it runs down to the drainage on the one catch basin down there at Wheatfield. The other catch basin is at the driveway right off of 15th Street there. I think it's called Hatfield. I talked to a couple of the residents yesterday. They said when there's a good rain there, the whole west end of the park gets flooded out. So there's no catch basins down there. The curb, it is paved, but it's just a small rolled curb kind of thing, not curb and gutter like we're used to seeing. So I think that if the flood plan had come out, they would have addressed that issue because those people on the west end. The other main issue is that you'll notice the properties just to the east of the school there. Those are R4 duplexes, and there's sidewalk all along 15th Street there. There's sidewalks inside their parts there. To the south, my track there, Ashford Place, sidewalk inside the park, and to the east, that is our R1 residential area, sidewalks there and on 15th Street. Why is it that we can't have sidewalks put in along 15th Street on their side? Because the staff report's saying we think that the rezoning isn't going to affect the whole general look of it. Well, there's not a lot of people that are real in favor of having that trailer park there, or mobile home park, excuse me. So, and my last point for asking for a negative declaration, why are we going through this rezoning? He's got a half a dozen mobile homes sitting on lots right now with for sale signs on them. Why is he doing the rezoning and asking you folks to approve something? Is he doing something illegal by putting those mobile homes there? I don't know. It just seems to me that he's requesting to sell his mobile homes that he's already been doing. And we don't have any problem with that portion. But as his attorney mentioned, the wording in ours was very evasive, and on the tail end of that, they added to sell mobile homes only. And that's fine because it's, and he's already doing that right now. But they have 10 mobile homes there. So with all those things, I'm requesting for the 41 people that signed, and I might say that out of 29 of those 41 people, I got one signature per household, so I wouldn't be just flooding you with a lot of signatures. Take that 29, multiply it by 2, man and wife in the household that disagree with having this rezoning done. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Mr. McFadden, a question for you.
Could I see your notice?
Pardon?
Do you have your notice with you?
Do I have the notice? I sure did.
JJ, I have a question for you. Well, this is...
Give it back to you. I'll give it back to you.
Does PUD 82 have any screening requirements?
I'd have to go back and look at it. Usually, residential to residential, there would be no screening requirement.
Well, I understand, but I'm wondering if, since there were at some time at least fences surrounding this.
No, and if they're in disrepair, that's a zoning issue. We can get someone out to look at that.
Okay, David, maybe you've got my answer.
I can address the fence issue. The developer to the south actually came across 10 feet to our side and destroyed that fence. So my client just bought this property within the last few months. He's in conversation with that developer to have the fence replaced and fixed. So that is an ongoing process that will be fixed. It's just when the developer to the south excavated, it tore down some of the fence, and it's going to be fixed. I would like to note this mobile home development was zoned in 1983, well before any of these homes were here. I think the oldest plat surrounding this was 2003. So everybody that lives in this area moved to the area with the knowledge that there was a mobile home development. By its very term, mobile, it insinuates that it will from time to time move. So I don't think that this is anything that's out of the ordinary. I don't think it's anything that anybody that moved to the area could not foresee. To the issue of the homes that are currently for sale, with the way it's zoned now, he can sell the homes. They just can't move off of the property. So what he's doing now is in compliance with the zoning, because we did check with JJ on that. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions, and Mr. Seiler is here to answer any questions as well.
Mike?
I was coming to a realization about what you're saying. In other words, they can sell the homes that are on the property, but the person that buys the home must move in to the home as it's located.
Right. If he was going to buy it and move.
Can't buy it and move it to Tulsa.
Correct.
All right.
He as if it was a stick-built house permanent on a site.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Mine. Right.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Other questions or discussion, Commissioners?
So we're going to get the fence replaced?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's an issue of the gentleman to the south destroyed it, and it's going to be put back.
Okay.
I have a question of the staff. Are you absolutely positively convinced that the language of the zoning that we're getting ready to grant will not permit this site to someday become a mobile home sales lot?
10 mobile homes for sale to be moved off. That could possibly be moved off.
At a time.
Or stay there at the time. 10 at any one time.
And it has to be on a lot designated for a home, so you couldn't just have like you see the mobile home sales parks, and it's just stacks of mobile homes. This has to, so from the outside, it would look as if it was just a home on a lot that someone may be living in, for that very reason.
Is that my only control, that? I mean, that's the only thing that keeps it from being a mobile home lot? The fact that it has to be sitting on a lot somewhere?
We can only have 10 for sale at one time. It's no different than, it would look no different than if all of your neighbors at one time decided to put their homes for sale. It would just look like 10 homes for sale in that lot.
I'm less concerned about what it looks like, I guess, than about the possibility of future use conversion. I just want to be really sure that the limitations that are being placed on it are sufficient to keep that from happening.
Well, my question is what does PUD 82 say? I really feel a little bit unsure about voting on this without knowing exactly what. I can imagine it doesn't say anything. It says, that's my, with a PUD 82, it probably doesn't say anything, but if we have a copy of that or whatever, that'd be really, I think, beneficial because of just what the gentleman is talking about, half the fence is gone, I don't know what the condition is of the property, but your description wasn't very attractive. But knowing kind of how PUDs were done back in the day, like when you were on the commission, Nick. Thank you, Bob. That there wasn't anything except you can put mobile homes there, right?
Clearly remember 01. PUD 01. No. You're right. Back in that lower number, I doubt it was a very restrictive PUD, but I think Mr. Box has it and is looking at it.
I do have a copy. It was zoned from RA, and then the use it allowed is all uses permitted in the RMH2 Mobile Home Park District will be permitted in the planned unit development of Checkall Park. In addition, those uses permitted in the RMH1 Mobile Home Subdivision will be permitted. So it allowed a mobile home.
Are there any other like screening requirements, landscaping requirements, density or anything like that?
We weren't doing those.
I can always hope.
No, I don't believe
not likely
it is. But on the screening issue, I mean, we recognize it's a problem, but we had it screened, and unfortunately, the developer to the south destroyed the fence. So we're going to get it fixed. But
get the fence.
I assume that is your fence.
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
It's not wasn't constructed by the development to the south.
No, sir.
That's your fence.
Yes, sir.
The only reason I bring that up is because in the PUD that you've just submitted, it refers to what's existing at the time, it's allowed to be kept there. I mean, so you haven't added anything except the agreement to fix the fence. And I don't think that there's any way that anybody can make you do anything else other than move the homes off the property. That was it. Okay.
Mr. McFadden, you have something else?
Yes, I do.
Come to the microphone, and that way David will let you get to the microphone. That way we can have a record of what you say.
I think if we looked around the city, we would see that all the mobile home parks have perimeter fencing around them. They have some decorative split rail plastic fencing on 15th Street. You're looking in the backyards of these mobile homes. So technically speaking, the screening that they put there isn't really a desirable site when you're looking at somebody's backyard, what they would keep it in.
And I think they're agreeing to replace the fence. Am I right? Am I right?
And the sidewalks and the flooding, I think.
Well,
I don't know that
we can't do anything about sidewalks on 15th Street.
I wish we could.
Well, but the staff report said it was compatible to the area. It is not compatible.
It was there first is the issue. I mean, and of course the people who come and who might build to the south are free to put site screening on their property, as most people do in new housing additions. So they wouldn't be looking at his fence at all if they didn't want to. Commissioners?
I'm going to move for approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 14. Cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Item 15 is SPUD 671. It's an application by Todd and Marion Stone to rezone 15,800 Southwestern from PUD 185 to SPUD 671 in Ward 5.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Greg Massey with Massey Mann & Associates, representing the Stones, the applicants today. Excuse me. My address is 2500 East Wilshire Boulevard, Oklahoma City. We've reviewed the staff report and recommendations and have no objections with any of those. If y'all have any questions about this application.
This site's being used as an office now?
It is being used as a residence and a home office. That's correct. Yes.
No one has signed up, Commissioners.
Move approval.
Do we have a second? Second. Okay, motion and second to approve item 15. Cast your votes. And that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 16 is SPUD 672, application by Woodlake Partnership to rezone 6901 Northwest 63rd Street from PUD 1160 to SPUD 672 in Ward 1.
I'm going to step out on this one, John.
Okay.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, Reaching Our City. Also with me is Kevin Rogers, who's the director of Reaching Our City. What we have before you is an application to rezone to PUD 1160. This is located at 63rd and Lyrewood. And for those of you who are familiar with this site, it's been a host of things through the years. It was the Woodlake Racquetball Club at a time, and most recently it was zoned for PUD, allowing I-2 uses in coordination with the airport to the west and the other industrial in the area. What we're asking for is to rezone it for Reaching Our City. And I'm going to let Mr. Rogers get up here and explain what it is that Reaching Our City does, and then I'll come back up and discuss the PUD.
Mr. Rogers, if you give us your name and address, please.
Thank you. Kevin Rogers, Executive Director, Reaching Our City, 7710 Northwest 10th Street. Reaching Our City was established in 1999 as a collaborative effort of homeowner associations, area schools, area colleges, area churches, to benefit the citizens of that Northwest 10th Street corridor, as most of you are familiar with. We moved into the warehouse that we occupy now in 2003, and over the last few years we have established along with some collaborative partners, a kind of community center where people can come and receive remedial and educational services to help some of our residents get back up on their feet. Most of them come as a consequence of the food pantry that we offer there. However, everybody that comes sits down with one of our volunteer counselors, and we engage in a kind of case management process where we advocate for that person. We encourage that person. We hook them up with services like TANF so that they might get training and be able to go back to work. We work with area career centers. We work with the healthcare authorities so that our folks are engaged in the Sooner Care program or other kinds of Medicaid programs. And then, as a consequence, we're able to offer a number of resources. Not only do we have food, but we have 2 clinics available for them, a free clinic and a federally qualified health center. We also offer legal aid services. We have a large daycare. We have educational programs and social programs. For example, most of the children in our daycare, we are licensed for 90 children. Most of those children, in fact 94% of them, their moms and dads started in the food pantry, looking for some assistance, looking for some crisis care. We were able to engage them into the DHS program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. They were put to work. DHS reimburses us for daycare, which is a part of our program is to provide affordable daycare and help mom and dad go back to work. We have a resale shop. The resale shop, as opposed to handing things out, has a small fee for things that are necessary for our lifestyles today, bedroom furniture, clothing, cookware, etc. And one of the neat things about the program is that people now have the privilege of establishing some integrity by being able to buy those things instead of just having or receiving or requesting handouts for those kinds of products. So generally, we're just trying to put people back to work. We're trying to help them get back on their feet. The facility that you have before you is a second campus. We would like to expand into Two Lakes. We have been distributing food in the Two Lakes community for more than a decade. We're in a very small center, a very small strip center just north of this facility on Lyrewood. And as a consequence of our awareness of the need, working with the area churches, working with the local elementary school, we would like to go ahead and replicate the services that we have now on 10th Street into the Two Lakes community and serve that constituency as well.
Are there any questions for Kevin? As he stated, this is certainly a unique use, and it's one where their existing campus over on 10th Street has become so popular that it's servicing a lot of the residents in this Two Lakes area. So to relieve some of the pressure that facility is now handling, this facility will enable them to service those people. And as he noted, there is a food pantry that they operate just 4 blocks north in a strip center on Lyrewood. So this will bring it all in-house into one facility. So when we looked at this parcel, it was zoned I-2 and essentially allowed all the uses within I-2 because it was originally zoned in the PUD to service the airport and be in compliance with the rest of the area and the industrial. What I have handed out is a list that we sat down with the Reaching Our City folks and came up with a list of uses to remove from our PUD. The staff had asked for a handful of uses to be removed. We've actually removed more than the staff had recommended. You'll see 15 uses that we are proposing to remove, and additionally, 6 uses we will further limit to only be allowed to operate interior. If there was an RV sales, it would have to be inside. We're willing to stipulate that there will be no outdoor storage whatsoever, and then further limit the moderate industrial use to remove steel mill, remove sawmill, remove truck wash, remove rock or stone sales, and all uses must be interior. So with the uses that we remove and that we've limited, we feel that it's facility that will allow this group to do what they do, but keeping an eye to the future that this is now appropriate and keeping with the area, allowing industrial on a limited scale. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and staff has recommended approval of the application.
David, did you take communication services, telecommunications off?
Yes, and I apologize. I have it written on mine. It didn't get to yours. We will take out cell towers as well. I apologize for that.
Commissioners, no one has signed up.
And I would like to note on the TE, number 2, there's a sign currently in place that they were going to utilize. You heard Kevin talk about the different uses they have, a WIC and the food pantry and the medical services. So there's a sign in place that they're going to utilize. Any new development will stipulate that it has to be a ground 8-foot monument sign. But they would like to keep the sign that's in place.
How about EMD signs? You going to let that happen? And non-accessory signs?
Let me look.
We usually have that dealt with in these applications.
No, we'll stipulate to no EMD.
No EMD, and then what about non-accessory signs?
Yes, no non-accessory. All the signs that we're going to use are going to be accessory uses inside of.
But we usually specifically say that in the PUD that they will be prohibited.
We can add that this PUD was drafted prior to our involvement, but we can certainly amend that and make that a part of approval if it's granted.
And then what about telecommunication towers? They're permitted.
Yeah, we will take out the cell tower.
We took those out. We took that out, Bob.
Okay. And then the other thing that the staff said in its report was that all I-2 special permit and special exception uses could be deleted.
I apologize. We took out a majority of those within our 15.
I know, but I don't.
The only conditional use left is mural and antenna broadcast towers, and then the only special exception use still in is funeral and intermittent services. And there's a cemetery right next door.
I wouldn't want my funeral to be intermittent, but I would want to be interred. But
there is an existing MOD sign that's on the property. MOD is a business that currently has some space in there. That's a 4 feet, 3 feet sign. Could we include that to have that kept until such time that MOD no longer needs it, and then that will be removed? Because technically with what we're doing, it would be non-accessory until MOD no longer needs it. Like I said, it's yeah, I mean, I'm taller than that sign, so.
that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely, no billboards.
Okay, so that will be the only non-accessory sign, and it will be removed.
Yes, sir.
No EMD signs.
No EMD.
No other non-accessory signs.
No other non-accessory signs.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 16 as we've conditioned it. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you.
Janice, you're a no? Okay, just checking.
Item 17 is PUD 1462, an application by Virginia Hines to rezone 11,200 Northeastern from single family to PUD 1462 in Ward 7.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori. I go by Lori Hines. I live at 6725 Stone Valley Drive in Edmond. I am the applicant, and I have a contract pending on this 10 acres contingent upon it being rezoned to fit the purpose of allowing me to build the Montellano, an Italian-themed event center. Italian-themed event center. There was a photograph, I think, elevations.
Well, no, I mean,
Oh.
the Italian theme in the event.
Weddings, receptions, things like that.
Have you, Cap, where am I? What are the building material requirements?
The 50/50 requirement? Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah. Was there a different request by staff on building requirements, JJ, building finishes? Or am I thinking of another case?
What's the question?
The 9.1 on the second page, is that what you're referring to?
Building materials.
The facade regulations?
Yeah, they're going, our standard facade regulation is only 50/50.
Okay.
Rather than 70/30. Because
Okay.
of they're using a lot more drivite or stucco on the building.
And you had no comment? Okay. No one signed up, Commissioners. Questions, comments?
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion to approve item 17. Cast your votes. And you're approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 18 is PUD 1463, an application by Punnett Construction to rezone 13409 Northeastern from SPUD 462 and PUD 1270 to PUD 1463, Ward 7.
Brian, it must be this case I'm thinking of where the staff wanted a change in the building materials.
Yes, it was. We agree. We
Okay.
agreed all the TEs.
All right. We do have Roger Brawley who wants to speak. He's in the homeowners. You'll give us your name and address, please?
Roger Brawley, 13401 Creekside Drive.
Okay.
I live in the Oaks Addition, which is adjacent, and am representing the Oaks Homeowners Association. Our concern with this is that we are experiencing flooding problems in our addition. There's been a great deal of development north of our addition that has caused increased water flow through our addition. And we're hoping that rather than paving all of this or a portion of it and adding it into the creek, that there can be some kind of other storm drainage designed to handle that water, to carry it off and away from the creek that's giving us problems.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
His comment is actually relevant to what we're going to consider next on the agenda, and that is this historical guidelines, and it was interesting that the guidelines said that in historical areas, Nesta Park Heritage, only concrete could be used because concrete was used historically, and it recommended against porous materials used for driveways, et cetera. And I've said many times that there are these other environmentally correct things that don't particularly run off the water, that will absorb it into the... Is this development any kind, are you considering any kind of that?
We haven't even thought about that yet, but by law, you have to take the water obviously down the hill to the creek.
No, I understand.
But no, not on this one, but I think it's a great idea to think about in the future. But for this one actually, we're actually down zoning what's going to be built. This originally was done with a bunch of 43-foot lots along the east side as attached houses, and then commercial on that PUD 1270. So this is going to be all single family. So I think it's going to be less intrusive than what was there now. Yeah. But again, I like your idea. I'd love to be part of that discussion someday, but for this, not for residential over here. But.
Okay. And then I don't know what you do with how water runs off the roofs and the regular driveways, et cetera, but I assume that the engineering will channel it to where this gentleman, at least you can say we're doing our best to make sure this happens.
Sure. Yeah, we don't want to damage the creek as it is, but you have to take it to your low spot, which is the creek. And there's 4 TEs, we agreed all of them.
Commissioners?
Move approval of the application as submitted.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve item 18. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 19 has already been considered. Items 20, 21, and 22 have been continued. Item 23 is the public hearing regarding the green guidelines, the Oklahoma City Historic Preservation Standards, and guidelines incorporating sustainability principles. And Catherine is here if you have any questions on this item.
Commissioners? Nick?
Well, we had a study session on this. And at our study session, Catherine was there, the chairman of the HP Commission was there, another HP commissioner was there, and we posed a question, how do you differentiate between the guidelines and the standards, and why can't we draft an ordinance with the guidelines out of it? They tried, and frankly fumbled and stumbled, trying to explain to us what's a guideline and what's a standard and how they interpret them, and couldn't. Subsequent to that meeting, I talked with the municipal counselor's office and said, is there a way to do this? And I was told, well, sure, we do it. You know, there's only like one other district that has guidelines in the ordinance. We'll look into it. I'll talk with the planning director, and maybe you need another study session or something. All of a sudden, it pops up on our agenda today, no changes. And, you know, if we go forward with this, what we're going to see is what we have seen under the existing ordinance. We're going to see the chairman of the HP Commission look down at an applicant and say, you know, the guidelines are in the ordinance. It would be a violation of our oath if we didn't strictly follow the guidelines. We are going to have HP commissioners sitting there wagging their fingers at applicants, saying it may appear to you that we're splitting hairs, but that's what we do. Folks, we can do better than that. The train has left the station, I understand, and the momentum's going for this. I can't support it just because of that. We can do better.
Here's my observation on that. I agree completely, because I'd like to know whether we're dealing with a law or a guideline that has flexibility and somebody can do something that doesn't violate the ordinance. I have to say, though, that the work that's been done on the preservation standards and guidelines that we have in front of us is really good work. These are environmentally conscious, standards and guidelines, etc., about how you deal with, and I like the fact that we do have neighborhoods that are designated historical, because those neighborhoods, for the most part, have been improved rather than deteriorated, and it's a good thing. But, as Commissioner Gale says, I'd like to know what all this means, and this is one of the things I looked at when I read through this. I mean, this is alterations to building fabric and components of historic buildings. It has nothing, but this is just how it works. Maintenance, actions that do not require review. You know, you can do certain things that nobody can review. But then here, administrative review. Actions that require review and may be administratively approved. So a person that wants to do certain things, what the heck does he do with that? I have a personal example of that issue, of it said in the PO guidelines, this is administratively approved, and because the applicant didn't comply with all the things in there, it went to the commission for a full hearing, and that went on and on and on ad nauseum. It was a nightmare, and should never have. This is what you're saying, is that should never be. There should be specificity. There should be, if it is administratively approved, then that's where it stays, with the planning department, the administrative staff. If it doesn't, if you can't do it, then you have an ordinance. You must do this, or you can't do it. And so I agree. I would like to have this tweaked a little bit more, just for the purpose of specificity, giving applicants knowledge of what it is they're dealing with and how they can get through these things in a more comfortable, efficient manner. That's my comment on this preservation standards and guidelines.
What's curious to me, if I can make a comment, is looking at the staff cover sheet, which in 2 paragraphs says the current guideline standards as adopted in 2003 provided a more clearly defined approach, et cetera, et cetera. Next line, or next paragraph, 2003 guidelines and standards in use for 8 years have helped to make a noticeable improvement. If that's the case, they've been applied, they've been interpreted, how? And why can't we get a simple explanation for what that is? And I'm an advocate of HP. As you know, I lived in an HP neighborhood for 27 years and have been involved in HP. Janice lives in an HP neighborhood now. We certainly have benefited from that ordinance over the years. And I sat on the HP Commission at one time many years ago. And it was the most difficult job as a city volunteer I've ever done. But with the point where you raised, and unfortunately I missed the study session, but I guess I'm befuddled that you can't answer that question.
Well, Mr. Chairman, going a step farther, and this document's 133 pages long, and I've poured over it, and I'll say the vast majority of it looks, to me, it looks good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's good stuff. I don't see why it's a requirement for HP to have its guidelines incorporated in the ordinance. It's a hurdle I don't understand. I know they're there now, but it has caused so many problems, so much interpretation, and at that study session when we asked the question, and, you know, for you that were there, correct me if I'm wrong, but we couldn't get the answer. If we can't get the answers, how can the public get the answers? How in the world can an applicant come along and say, well, okay, I understand I'm supposed to do this, and maybe he's supposed to do this because it's a guideline, when our staff can't differentiate. Or our staff is unwilling to differentiate between a guideline and a standard. But if those guidelines are meant to be guidelines, they don't need to be in the ordinance. If they're not, don't call them guidelines, incorporate it all in the ordinance, and say this is the law. That's what an ordinance is. It's the law. A guideline's a guideline. It's for the commission to consider and apply. That's what guidelines are for. The law is to follow, or, as we do sometimes, vary for reason.
I guess I'll weigh in. I would like to lavishly praise our staff for the work that they have done. I know that's tedious and time-consuming and thankless. And I have to say that obviously HP is some kind of strange beast, and it's difficult to wrestle apparently. But I did express at our study session that I was concerned at the level of interaction with the neighborhoods most directly affected after this final draft was achieved, and I didn't get much response to that. Before and during the process, there were individual meetings with neighborhoods, there was a lot of attendance, there was a lot of feedback. But once that process went underway and they were drafted and circulated and discussed and amended, and now we're at a final draft to be adopted, once that final draft was achieved, there really wasn't the same level of participation. And I understand that, postcards were sent, but there was not the level of actual outreach that I think is necessary for this kind of step that we're about to take here. what concerns me about this draft is what it doesn't speak to. Every commissioner up here has probably got some story about HP they could tell. They are legion and they are miserable. And I mean, people can just go on about it forever. It's you know, woe unto you who come in contact with the HP Commission in any way, shape, or form. And that's just not right. I mean, there has got to be some approachability, workability, interaction that's somewhat positive, that can be managed by a person without a lawyer and an accountant and an architect in tow. I mean, that's just not all right. And so I guess I'm having a little trouble mustering the vote for this as well, not because I necessarily disagree with what is here, but because I have real concerns about what's not here. At every meeting that I've ever attended and every cocktail party at which this subject has come up, the discussion has weighed heavily on the subject of windows. And, you know, the current thinking is that it's better to keep the windows you have and repair them, and that throwing them into the landfills is bad, and, you know, energy efficiency is not really true, and, you know, that even though the guidelines in some ways favor appearance over original materials, on this subject they do not. And, you know, I just don't think that's a sufficient response to something that is billing itself and attempting to be, you know, the greening of the HP ordinance. I just don't think we're there. I think we can do better. And, you know, I think we need to keep working on it.
All right. Can I respond?
Yes, you may.
The funding for this revision of the guidelines was supported out of a federal grant, which was specifically targeting energy conservation, and we hired somebody who, in our mind, had the best qualifications in the country to review this, and to their mind, they have taken these standards to a higher, greener level than anywhere else in the country, to the degree that they're looking at using this as a model. Maybe it doesn't meet everybody's expectations on what we should aspire to, but it certainly goes a lot further than others at this point in time. I have to disagree on several of the things said in terms of the neighborhood involvement. Other than knocking on people's doors, each individual door, we have reached out as much as we possibly can within the constraints of what we have to be able to engage people. We had 4 public meetings at the end that virtually nobody showed up at. That would seem to me to be a sign that people have been comfortable with the final product. Because, well, if they have a problem with it, we haven't heard from them, and we've given them plenty of opportunity to voice their opinion. This has been considered at the HP Commission on multiple occasions. There have been multiple opportunities for people to interact on this process. So I don't believe that we could have done anything else to invite people's opinion other than to drag that out of them. There's discussion on the guidelines and standards. HP is a difficult beast anywhere that it functions around the country. It's based on national guidelines. It's meant to have flexibility in there that is articulated where you can as standards, but a lot of it requires consideration of local circumstances, which is why you have to have guidelines, which is why you have the two blended together. It's the way that has functioned for a long time. We have guidelines and standards in other things that we do as well. I think that staff goes out of their way to try and communicate the difference between those. It's articulated in the staff report, and it's up to the HP Commission to make that interpretation in what they consider to be the best interest of implementing the HP requirements, as well as supporting the applicant and the neighbourhood's needs as well. It is not an easy assignment. I think they try to do the best they can in that respect. In terms of administrative approval, it says administrative approval is doable except under certain circumstances, and those are articulated and communicated to applicants. And we never really had a lot of administrative approval authority before. We have that now. We're trying to expand that as much as we can, so we're making it as easy as possible on the applicants, and also reducing the load on the commission. But the intent is always to facilitate as easy a process as possible. I'm not going to get into the specifics on each of the cases that we may be referring to. I think it's important that we pass it. If there are other things that we need to do in the future, then we are happy to take additional input. All of our ordinances are always under review, are always subject to revision for improvement. We are under a timeline in terms of meeting the conditions of the grant for this. I am concerned about that. I really do feel that we've had a lot of review on this, and I'm going to encourage you to vote for approval on it, and if we want to have another study session and consider additional recommendations for other amendments to the process, and we'd be happy to do that.
So are you telling us that the federal law requires the guidelines to be embedded in our ordinance?
They are the foundation for HP in any jurisdiction in the country.
I have
But back up. We cannot adopt an ordinance for HP with the standards that are enumerated in here, in our ordinance, and then set out separate guidelines that are not incorporated in the ordinance and be an HP district. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't think that's what he's telling you.
No.
You know, if all I'm asking is go through this document, identify standards and identify guidelines. Leave the standards in the ordinance and put the guidelines in guidelines. And don't put them in the ordinance. So we don't have the chairman saying the guideline is an absolute law and we're in violation of our oath. I've heard that on three different cases. 3 different cases, and I don't watch the HP Commission that often, but on 3 separate cases I've heard that impassioned plea when there is a teetering on a deal. Oh, nope. We might like to, but we can't because that's incorporated in the deal. Well, I'm sorry. I don't buy that. I have difficulty saying if it's that way, if it's that strict, we don't need an HP Commission. All we need is an administrator to hold up the law and say this is it. Why do we bother to have a hearing?
Excuse me, are the guidelines policy in effect? Are they like policies that you want to try and follow?
Catherine can probably explain it better than me, but I mean, you have the standards, the guidelines are there to support that interpretation of the national guidelines and to respond to the nuances of each application. It's there to provide that capacity to be able to look at the pros and cons of each individual case. So because there is no solid black and white for everything in historic preservation. If you wanted to have solid black and white in there, it would be a bigger nightmare than it's being portrayed as.
That's the whole point. Those guidelines, because they're in there, are being interpreted as solid black and white.
I understand what you're saying, but that is not the way that they are being written in the staff reports.
Is the issue then training of the HP commissioners to understand? Well, I mean, if what you're saying is that the staff report is kind of directing them to use some judgment where it's appropriate, and they're not doing that because they're saying we don't have the flexibility to do that, then they're not trained and they don't understand the ordinance.
Well, I think we do a lot of training of the HP Commission.
And that's not a criticism. It's a question about, is that the issue?
And again, I think to your point, you said it was the most difficult assignment you had.
Well, and I think it is. There were no guidelines when I was doing it either.
Exactly.
It was a free-for-all.
Yeah.
To be kind.
It is better now than it was then.
Well, and that's what I thought when the guidelines first came along. I thought that they were going to give us some further direction, but not lock us in so that that was the only thing we could do.
They're not meant to lock in, but I can't really respond to, whether it's 3 or there's...
Well, no, I don't think we ought to be talking about individual cases. That's not the point. But the point is, how is the commission using this document or the existing document, and how will it use this one?
Chairman, at our training session, when the question came up, the commissioners were quick to say, standards are standards and they have to be followed, and guidelines are guidelines. They were quick to tell us that.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's the case, why does it have to be incorporated in the ordinance? It doesn't.
Well, short of taking them out of the ordinance, can there be some language, this is back to the Municipal Counsel's office, defining what the purpose of the guidelines are? In other words, have some softening language so that the guidelines would be interpretable, discretionary, etc., and you have some sort of statutory vision of these are not absolute. I mean, just some exculpatory language that you would put in there that would maybe alleviate your concern, Nick, that these are part of the law. You don't have an HP commissioner saying, we have to do this, because the language is there in section 1.023.
I think, and I haven't looked at the ordinance in detail, I think there is that language that clearly defines what a guideline is. We could try to make it more clear, but I think what Commissioner Gales is concerned about is that if it's in the ordinance, they don't take that guidance, they treat them as absolutes, and I'm not sure that gets around the problem.
Well, I guess my question to you, Dan, from a legalistic standpoint, can we not have an ordinance without incorporating the guidelines in it?
Yes.
Then I think we should. It's just that simple.
Well, I mean, we just have our ordinance like it is and we just throw this away?
No.
Is that your point?
Yeah,
or you parse this, you take this apart and incorporate it into the ordinance as on a piecemeal basis, section by section? That seems to be a challenge to me. A task of monumental proportions. We never agree on it.
Well, what I understood Commissioner Gales to be suggesting is that we go through this draft, identify those things that are standards, and put them into the ordinance, and identify those things that are guidelines, and separate them out and put them in a set of guidelines that accompany but are not incorporated into the ordinance itself.
Okay. Then that perhaps is an implementation path, but don't we first have to say, we're going to adopt these subject to our making a further determination at some time as to the division of these things?
Mike, this is an ordinance. What we're asking today, what we're asked to do, is to send this to City Council for adoption. And make it
as an ordinance.
Make it the law like we already have. That's what I object to.
Well, is there candid? I mean, you separate those out. I think that's going to make it far more difficult for
I think it'll be difficult
the applicants and staff and everybody else to be able to implement to use the documents.
I remember the discussion to include guidelines in the ordinance years ago, and I was involved in some of those discussions. And the reason for doing that at the time was to have them be described as guidelines, but to be able to increase awareness of commissioners and applicants and staff as to what the guidelines were, because generally in the past, everybody remembered the ordinance and forgot the guidelines. It was kind of like going to the Board of Adjustment when I got there and getting a staff report and variance requests, but not having memorized what the 4 standards were for variances. Those of you who served realize, well, we put those on there, and the discussion about whether a variance was appropriate became much more specific. I mean, if you didn't have a hardship, you didn't have to go to the other 3 standards. And so the goal was to get something similar in here, and just on the basis of awareness. If it's not worked, that's a different question.
I understand. Going the other way for a moment, we have new ordinances and we have many sets of guidelines. I'm only aware of 2 ordinances that incorporate guidelines. All the rest of them are standalone ordinances with the guidelines. All those others seem to be working. One of the 2 that incorporate them that I'm aware of, there may be more, but one of the 2 seems to be working. One of them seems to be dysfunctional. That happens to be this one.
Russell, what is your timeline? And I mean, tell us what you're up against here.
We have to have this, I mean, essentially we're at the end of the timeline, aren't we, Catherine?
Catherine Montgomery, Historic Preservation Officer. This project originally started about 1.5 years ago. It was scheduled to take a year. It's taken 6 months longer than planned. The grant that authorized or gave us the money and the ability to do this work, we have to have these adopted by July 31st in order to comply with the requirements of that grant. Our goal was to be able to go to City Council on July 3rd and then go back to them just before the end of July and have these then in place the day after that.
So you were going to introduce these to council on July 3rd, and then in their second meeting, and there'd only be 2 in July for the council, you were going to have this adopted by the council, is that right? And you would beat the July 31st time frame?
We would meet that.
Well, council meets
July 3rd.
Well, I understand, but I'm trying to think of how many more meetings they have in June, because pretty soon they go to the every other week schedule.
They meet next week, but not the 26th, I think.
Well, 2 comments, Catherine. When did we have our study session?
Last month.
Yeah. It was a month ago, wasn't it?
It was in May.
We had problems at the study session. I raised issues that have been circulating at the time. If time was of the essence and everybody was concerned, why wasn't anything addressed? I deal with a lot of federal grants, a lot of clients with federal grants. Most of the ones I'm familiar with can be extended. I don't think it's a reason to do this, just, oh, well, we're out of time, so we're going to have to close our eyes and approve something. That's not a reason to me. If we've really taken it, we had a grant, we knew what the deadline was, then we stubbed our toe for whatever reason.
Well, Commissioners, we've got 2 options in there.
We've got to do something.
Anyone else have any comments further before we've got 2 options here, one of which is to recommend the council adopt this, and the other is to table it for further review. I mean, those are the two choices before us.
Well, we can pass it on to council without a recommendation, can't we? If you guys don't want to vote on it, then send it on up. Let them take it. Let them do it. I mean, it may not necessarily be our job, but I think there's a couple of considerations here. One, we ought to respect the timeline. I don't necessarily disagree with Nick. I think we're going to have some issues with respect to these guidelines. I think that it'll take us 3 years to separate the guidelines versus the standards. Frankly, we'll never necessarily reach an agreement on that. I think that's going to be a difficult challenge that extends it. I don't necessarily like the rush. No criticism intended, but send it on up. What else are we going to do? Spend another 2 years on this?
I make the point, it's going to take us 3 years to separate the standards from the guidelines.
They agree on them with the HP Commission.
Everybody has told us they know what the standards are in here and what the guidelines are in here. And, you know, if we don't know, then how in the world are they going to be applied?
I'm not arguing.
If you can't answer that question, then you shouldn't approve this ordinance. If it can't be applied, it shouldn't be.
But here's my thought about HP, because additionally is this. HP, very challenging, very hard, but I think as much as anything, and Janice and I have been talking about this, it's a function of the commission, not necessarily the document by which they operate from. It's just like any panel. There's probably people that appear before us that say, I like that old commission better than I like this commission. Those guys were a lot more reasonable than those 9 guys that are sitting up there now. I think that, you know, because we have guidelines, we vary things from time to time. I just don't know if things get better delaying. If I was convinced that they would, my view might be different, but I'm not sure that the knot gets untied putting things off. That's just, I can't answer the question.
Let me throw my 2 cents worth again in on this issue. I agree with what Commissioner Gales is saying. But it's the individual commissioner on HP that makes the decisions about what he or she decides is important or whatever, or it's the decision of the administrative staff, what he or she says, this is what happens, etc. Irrespective of standards and guidelines, statutory or discretionary, this particular body of work, I have to say, is a really great body of work for HP designated areas, what to do, how to do it. It exhibits a great deal of effort in a way that is environmentally sensitive. It preserves the neighborhood. It's very, very good work. So my suggestion, if I would do a motion, and agreeing with Commissioner Hensley, I don't know how much time it would take to separate the two out or to deal with whatever it is, but I think that probably within the time constraints that this is perhaps, it's the same thing we have right now. We have the same issue right now that hasn't been changed. I think that we ought to send this on to council with a discourse of what the discussion has been among the horseshoe here about standards, guidelines, etc., and then ask the municipal council's office, perhaps, to let us know about what the word guideline means within the context of this ordinance, and whether or not there can be really strong language to the implementors, that's the HP Commission, of the applications that come in, of what they are entitled to do and how much flexibility they have with regard to guidelines. So with that, I would move this go to the council.
I'll second that, but I have a question. when this goes into the ordinance, Dan, I mean, we have, as I look at, I see section 1.6, a brief history of Oklahoma City. Now, is that going into the ordinance? You see what I'm saying? I'm just wondering that there is certainly an argument that says that the picture of the Shepherd Historic District, I mean, this is some of this stuff is puff. I mean,
typically
let me just, I have the citation from the ordinance that maybe would be helpful. As you know, the guidelines and standards are a separate document from the ordinance.
Okay.
But the ordinance specifically says, under section 4250.4, Historic Preservation Review, section B, Authority and Execution, the Historic Preservation Commission shall review and take action on applications for certificate of appropriateness. For the purpose of administering this section and assisting the Historic Preservation Commission and property owners in evaluating and completing preservation projects which are historically and architecturally appropriate, that document, known as Preservation Guidelines and Standards for Oklahoma City's Historic Districts and any amendments thereto, is hereby adopted by reference as if set out in length herein. So when the hardcover copies of the ordinance get published, the guidelines and standards are not in there. They remain guidelines and standards as a separate document. A guideline is something that's recommended, but not necessarily required in order to maintain the historic authenticity of a particular district. A standard is something that says, this shall be done. And the ordinance has a section where if a particular property, it's inconsistent to make it with the history of that property to make a decision as, quote, directed by a standard that's in the standard and guidelines, there's a section that says unique circumstances. And that's part of the ordinance. And staff takes great pains at putting in, at helping property owners to identify what are the unique circumstances that make this property one where the fence should come forward 40 feet as opposed to the others. And so, lots of cases are decided through unique circumstances if it's appropriate for that property. We review over 200 cases a year. We have, you can count them on one hand how many cases are denied. There's been a few recently, more, it goes in fits and starts sometimes. And we've had no new appeals that I can think of in about the past year. So I know that there are certain specific cases that different commissioners are aware of. As far as cases that require attorneys, I can think of 3 in the past year out of 200 cases. There are lots of projects that use architects. There isn't any state or requirement that you use an architect for a residential building. Some people do that at their option. Some people use building designers. I think that addresses a lot of the questions that have come up, and I'm happy to address any others. Oh, I did want to say, as far as the administrative approval items are concerned, the ordinance addresses that as well. And in section 4250.4J, administrative staff approvals for certain items of work. Certain items of work may be administratively approved by staff. All applicants are required to submit an application for administrative review. All administrative approvals shall be duly recorded by the Historic Preservation Officer, and a list of administrative approvals shall be provided at the full Historic Preservation Commission. The following items may be administratively approved. It doesn't say that the following items shall be administratively approved. So for anything that doesn't meet the requirements or recommendations of the standards and guidelines, those things are sent to the Commission. And that's kind of, if staff was to issue something like an order of denial, then you could see the HP Commission as being the first right of appeal. It's an informal process. The Historic Preservation Commission staff says, well, this fence is located forward of the line that the guidelines and standards require, so we're going to take it to the Commission. The applicant has the opportunity to
talk about that with the commission, maybe present some unique circumstances, because staff can't approve unique circumstances. That is the privy of the HP Commission. And then if, by chance, the HP Commission denies that, the next right of appeal is to the Board of Adjustment, and the next right of appeal is to District Court. So there are several steps of appeal that are available. It's just that that first kind of informal step doesn't cost anybody any more money. What it costs them is the time to attend the meeting.
So, Catherine, what I hear you saying, see if you agree with me, standard equals shall. Guideline provides direction.
And recommendation. But you don't have to do it that way.
Okay, but the one thing you said is, well, if it doesn't meet the standards and guidelines, you probably need to separate that comment. If it doesn't meet the standards...
That's exactly it, Mr. Chairman. As she read the ordinance, where she talks about the incorporation, she made a good point. The ordinance itself is short. And then there's incorporation of the standards and guidelines. Just delete and guidelines and just incorporate the standards. Why can't we do that, Dan?
I think you could. I'd say again that once it's adopted by reference, it is part of the ordinances.
It is part of
We adopt a lot of codes as by reference, particularly building codes, plumbing codes. We adopt a federal code. When this is adopted by reference, it becomes a part of the ordinances.
Now, Dan, again, I understand that with respect to standard. Standard equals shall. And it's incorporated by reference, so it's part of the ordinance. But now with respect to the guidelines,
when you adopt this document as a whole, you adopt the standards and the guidelines.
Now, but are the guidelines to provide direction, or are the guidelines then, do they become standards in effect?
No, I think they're intended to provide direction.
Okay, that's
And that's my hurdle. I like this document. I would like to adopt this document. What I don't want to incorporate is the guidelines in the by reference in the ordinance.
Well,
And if it's as simple as drafting an amendment to our ordinance, which is short, and deleting guidelines, then let's make that revision and go forward. If it's not, then I still have a problem.
Well, or Nick, if I understand what Dan just said, by incorporating the standards and guidelines, he said the standards then become ordinance equals shall, but the guidelines are a direction which is subject to interpretation, then that becomes a commissioner training issue and not,
that's correct.
Do you agree?
That's what the intent is.
Yes. I agree with Dan's statement. My problem is, guess what? We know better. We've seen what happens here. Whether it's a training issue, whether it's a full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes issue, I'll do what I want to do, it doesn't matter. It's happening. Well, here we have an opportunity to delete guidelines from it and let them be guidelines and not have somebody come back, whether they're making a valid argument or not, come back and saying that guideline is the ordinance, it's the law.
Okay.
That's my objection.
I hear you, but I've got to go. The problem with the document in parsing that out in this particular circumstance is that the document, as I thumb through it, we say we're adopting standards and guidelines, but it doesn't say guideline and it doesn't say standard, and the document is not organized in that context to where I could point to it and say, okay, the standard under section 3.2 is 1, 2, 3. And so the document in its organization, and not a criticism of staff, this was a document that was presented to staff by the consultant. there's less sensitivity to where you could say, gee, this is our standards, this is our guidelines. If you're going to have that, if you're going to make that distinction, potentially, I think that
Mike,
you
you're
have
just
to
making the
point them
argument
out.
that it's a substandard document.
Well, for what we're trying to do, it's not necessarily a substandard document, but it may not meet necessarily. It's just a fat finger deal. It's a square peg round hole. We're trying to fit a document that we have into something that potentially was maybe not intended for. I mean, you know, because of the nature of HP, in and of itself, it's somewhat always going to be subjective.
It will always be somewhat objective, and I mean, staff and the commission have reviewed it in addition to a number of other stakeholders in this process who are directly impacted by this on a regular basis and have found this to be a document that they feel comfortable with using going forward.
We've had a complete expression of everybody's sentiments at this point. We also have a motion and a second to send this on to council, I assume as recommendation. It was your motion, Bob. Okay. All right.
Let me just add another issue here. You know, I agree, I mean, about the separation standards guidelines, but given if we do that, then do the guidelines kind of fall in the crack? In other words, you know, my motion was to include some revision of language relating to exactly, Dan, what you said. I mean, exactly what the effect of the guidelines are, and make that part of the ordinance. That you said it may be in there, but I want it in there in boldface and, you know, highlighted with, you know, whatever. And so that was my motion with that addition.
Okay. The only problem that I see is, to reference Mr. Hensley's comments, I'm not sure I can go through this document and tell you what's a guideline and what's a standard.
I think that's the reason.
But I think you're asking for an introductory statement.
Yes, we can do that. That's part of the ordinance.
Right. You know, yes. And I'm sure that's here, but
maybe it needs to be right up front.
That's what you're asking for.
Yeah, and that's the part of the motion that I say, because again, I'll emphasize, I like the work that went on. I like what's in here. I like the whole thing, and I think to delay it, to try to pill out all this stuff, if we get there, Nick, we can always say, I want to look at it again. Yeah, we can.
You can say it.
Well,
that's where it'll stop.
We can start looking at it again next month because we have the ability to initiate or modify ordinances or propose them to council.
And that's kind of what I'm going to suggest to do. So that is my motion.
I'm certain for that to happen.
Well,
we'll see if it happens.
What we could do, if I'm asking, do you want that statement? Because we can do that. We can add a page.
I think having this is a legal bit of drafting, and so it's really municipal councilor's office to really guide you on what those words are that really have meaning and
So I'm thinking that some simple words, like 100 words or less.
One more point. The ordinance as it's drafted refers to the national HP standards and guidelines, correct?
In making decisions, yes.
And then, so it refers to the national standards and guidelines.
Right.
So they are codified somewhere, correct?
Yeah, the Secretary of Interior's 10 standards, basically, is that correct?
Right, and then they have 57 pages of guidelines.
And are those guidelines set out separately from the standards in that document?
Yes.
Okay.
I got it.
There you have it. We are adopting the national standards and guidelines, correct? And if they are set out in that document, there is no room for interpretation of where they are in here. They're already defined.
That's intended as a, one-size-fits-all guiding document for the entire country that is then subject to...
I understand. But can't we craft our ordinance to say if we are adopting those, we are adopting by reference to standards and not the guidelines?
I say we vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second before us. Cast your votes. It's approved, 5-3. Okay.
We have one other item, which is item 24, which is an ordinance for public hearing regarding ABC uses, location requirements, therefore specifically relating to separation requirements regarding colleges, basically.
It's Bricktown and the music. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 24. Cast your votes. And that's approved. Dick, did you mean to approve this last one? Okay. Got it. Planning Commission committees, Planning Commission members. Yeah.
You have an election requirement?
Election of officers.
My turn. To recommend the election of the slate of officers that we currently have, and that would be Commissioner Hensley as, what's your title, Vice
Chairman.
Vice what?
Chairman.
Vice Chairperson, and Commissioner Yokel as Chairman of the Planning Commission. You can't do it.
Second. Say any other.
Okay. All in favor?
Cast your votes, I guess.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, one more year. Bear with me here. Planning Department.
All I can say is we will not be having any study sessions during the summer. So.
Good plan. I vote for Russell to stay as department head till the end of the summer. Development Services? Dan? No citizens? Other business? Motion to adjourn? We're out of here. 4:22, short meeting.